All right, welcome back, everybody. So as promised, we have with us Elizabeth Millner, Law&Crime's in-court reporter, who has been in that courtroom every day for testimony, including today. Elizabeth, great to see you. We have so many questions coming in for you. Let's get it started because I know my time with you is limited. We'll start it off with Danny. A question for Elizabeth. What issue was the judge upset about this morning regarding a possible leak? And, you know, I don't know if we know the full context of it, but whatever information you could provide would be great.
Absolutely. It was something that I think caught a lot of us by surprise this morning because the judge, when he came onto the bench, he seemed very kind of annoyed, very much kind of ticked off in a way just about what had happened. And so this is what we know so far, is that the judge was upset about this article that came out yesterday. And the judge accused somebody either on the prosecution side or even the defense side of lying about this because it pretty much this article, and we're not 100% sure where this article came from, but what we believe it might be is having to do with just something that happened during the sealed proceedings that happened on Friday. And so the judge said that someone kind of spilled the beans about what kind of went on when everyone was kind of kicked out of the courtroom for about a 20-minute period. They locked the courtroom doors and everything to kind of have this sealed proceeding as opposed to doing it in the robing room. And so the defense says they recently became aware of this article and they were adamant that they were not the source of the leak, and then the same with the prosecution. But really it seemed like the judge was kind of taking issue up specifically with Maureen Comey and Mark Agnifilo because they're the leaders of both sides, right? Maureen Comey representing the prosecution and then Mark Agnifilo being kind of the leader of the defense team or lead counsel just on both sides. And so he said, you know, on the extreme side of things that someone violated the court's sealing order, but also if they're kind of on notice as far as just finding out who is responsible for this. And they said they being the judge said the most extreme kind of action that he could possibly take is criminal contempt charges. So he's taking this very serious, and he seems very, he did seem very kind of annoyed about just this whole leak that had happened. Again, we don't know 100% sure what the article was and verify that this article was the in fact article, but we believe it might have been one that came out you know, just recently from a media outlet talking about what went down during the court proceedings that were sealed or were supposed to be sealed on Friday.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions about that. I mean, you pretty much answered it. We had a question from RSS. Can you ask Elizabeth to detail what happened when the judge reprimanded the defense over the sealed document? Question from Never Be. Do we know what happened this morning with information being leaked and the judge speaking about taking cell phone devices from the attorneys? I want to go to a question we have here, Elizabeth, from Olivia E. Did you get to see the jury's reaction to watching these explicit videos? And to be clear, what the jury's watching right now, are they freak-off tapes between Cassie and Sean Combs and others from 2012 to 2014? That's what CNN's reporting, but correct me if I'm wrong if that's what you think they might be watching. And what's the reaction to watching these tapes?
Yeah, so they have been watching the sexually explicit tapes, the freak-off tapes that had happened whenever Diddy was in a relationship with Cassie Ventura. And they were kind of bringing it out in correlation to the text message exhibits that we saw. And we were kind of like, where is this kind of going? And I think it might be to kind of show possibly in just another way that Cassie might have been in control during these particular tapes. And it was played kind of a lot today. And so what happens inside the courtroom is that all the jurors wear headphones, so we're not able to see this or hear this on the open speakers. The exhibit where the gallery is kind of shown these exhibits, the exhibit screen, I should say. Sorry, everyone, if I'm talking too fast. I had too much Celsius during one of the breaks because it was one of those days. But as far as just the jury's reaction to everything, they have been very professional as far as just kind of watching these really kind of graphic and sexually explicit videotapes. But I will say there was this one juror on the end, and I think he was the same juror that was moved from an alternate to now being kind of one of the main jurors, I should say. I will say it seemed like he couldn't take his headphones off fast enough in terms of just, they were playing these videos kind of at 2-minute increments or 3-minute increments, which is a long time to kind of watch these sexually explicit videos, especially in open court. But I did see him kind of take his headphones off pretty quickly, thinking that it was over. Then Tenny Garagos was like, okay, on to the next one. And it just seemed like it was played for a long duration of time. To me, it felt like forever. To them, it might have been just like 20 or 30 minutes. But for the most part, they kind of had no reaction beyond just kind of, I think, wanting it to be over. And then they went to lunch break. So it's a great way to introduce them to lunch, right, Jesse?
Right. I was just thinking that. That's, not the most appealing thing before you go off to lunch. But look, this is a tough case. Tough case to sit on and a tough case to hear all this evidence. Okay, got a question from Shady Goat. Is Diddy looking concerned in court, or is he his usual arrogant, smug self at the moment?
I wouldn't say arrogant and smug. I will say that from what I've seen of him, it seems like he is kind of wanting to know what the jury's reaction is to seeing these, what we believe to be the freak-off tapes, the sexually explicit tapes. I did see him kind of looking over to the jury box, maybe to see what their reaction is to seeing these play, especially for the duration and the amount of time that they were played today. But from what I could see of him, it seemed like, especially as they were kind of wrapping up the direct testimony of Delissa Penland and then going into the cross-examination, he was kind of doing what he normally does, kind of taking everything in. Once they were starting to gear up for the cross-examination by Tinny Garagos, I did see him do kind of the usual thing, passing off notes to his attorneys, that type of sort. But I wouldn't say he's necessarily sitting at the defense table all arrogant and smug. Not at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about Diddy's demeanor. Alexander Mateo, what is Diddy's demeanor like today, knowing that such graphic videos are being viewed by the jury? Madhavi Dasi, sending warmth from India, asks, what was Diddy's reaction to the judge's question to the defense about information being leaked? So when all that was going on that you mentioned, how was Diddy reacting?
Yeah, so sorry, everyone. There's about to be an ambulance passing. So, Jesse, if you could filibuster for me for like 10 seconds.
I'm going to filibuster. I'm going to filibuster with great comments to you. We got a question, a great comment from El Spelunker who says, Elizabeth fan club in the chat. We got another one who says, this is from Sam. Elizabeth, you have such a calming nature and voice. You need to bring out your own podcast. You are a natural. So look at this. Love for Elizabeth Millner. And not only did I have to filibuster, I was able to give you great compliments at the same time. So, yes, what was his demeanor like when the defense was talking about information being leaked, that whole issue at the beginning? What was Diddy doing?
I couldn't get a good gauge on just his reaction to everything. Like, I couldn't tell if he was confused, if he possibly knew about this. And so I couldn't really tell either way just what his reaction truly was. It seemed like everyone was a little on edge this morning when the judge was kind of, and I hate to use the word admonish because a lot of people have been using that word to describe the kind of talk to that the judge was giving both sides this morning. And so I don't want to say necessarily if he was leaning either way, that being Diddy, in terms of what his reaction was. And so I would say, little to no reaction, only because I don't want to, guess and then be wrong.
Sure. That's fair. That's responsible reporting from Elizabeth Millner. We got a question from Olivia E. again. Any more commotion sounding another juror potentially being removed? Did you hear about anything about that?
Not about a juror being removed. The only other issue had to do something, and this is what we did learn in open court, that it had to do with juror number 7. So it's unclear if that was possibly in correlation with the article that came out, or if it's possibly another issue. But what we do know is that whatever the issue is, the judge said that he'll handle it at the end of the day. So far, no other juror has been dismissed beyond juror number 6, something we already know about, something that had happened just yesterday. But as far as another juror being dismissed, so far, that hasn't happened yet.
Interesting poll we have up here, and you're the best person to ask this question. The poll we put up is, do you think there's been a shift of energy in the jury box with the alternate juror? 51% say hard to say, 31% say yes, 16% say no. Unless the people commenting on this poll are actually in the courtroom, I don't know how you would know a shift in energy, but has there been a shift in energy? You're in the courtroom, you tell me.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen or felt kind of a shift in energy between, once the juror was dismissed. I will say it looked a lot different, especially yesterday, knowing that there is one less juror in the jury box. But I will say, this was something that the defense was kind of worried about. They were kind of concerned about what the energy was like, especially for the entire jury altogether moving forward. And so they asked the judge, they kind of asked the jury staff members what was told about this specific juror being dismissed. And so what the judge relayed to the defense and even the prosecution today was that the jury was told that a juror was just excused from the case. And so, it's interesting whether or not that they could kind of feel like, okay, man, we just lost one of our own, that type of thing. And so I haven't seen necessarily an energy shift or change or anything like that. And from what I can see, the jury is still doing their job. They're still showing up on time. They're still jotting their notes down. They're still paying attention to all the testimony, knowing that we're like weeks into this trial and the defense case is slowly on the horizon. I will say I haven't seen like a demeanor change in terms of just them showing up and being ready to kind of serve on this jury every day coming into court. And everything just happened yesterday, but for the most part, no big change.
This is another follow-up question. It's very similar. This is from Afri Coco Lux. Have you noticed the demeanor change across the board between Diddy, the attorneys, you mentioned the jury, from day one to now? Are people more tense, lethargic, something else?
I think people might just kind of be wondering what's happening next. Obviously with this type of testimony, that being the summary witness, the summary charts, the summary exhibits, it's not the most juiciest testimony, especially because it's a lot of text messages. We've seen videos that we've seen, in terms of even just the sexually explicit videos that were shown today in court. The jury has seen, I guess, screenshots or images of this. I think probably seeing, longer durations of these particular videos might be having them feeling possibly a type of way. But as far as what I can tell in terms of just the energy across the board, surprisingly, as far as I can tell, because they're lawyers, right? Everyone kind of keeps a poker face. I haven't seen much of a shift. And maybe, as the prosecution is slowly kind of ending their case, maybe they're just ready, to see kind of what the next few witnesses have to say in terms of testifying. But what we do know is with the defense case slowly on the horizon, their case in chief, or the defense's case, I should say, is only going to last about 2 to 5 days. So we're slowly seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I think once closing arguments start to happen, and then once the jury is kind of given those jury instructions, and then they kind of take the charges to deliberate, then I feel like we might kind of see the mask kind of lift up just a little bit in terms of just how both sides are feeling in terms of maybe worriedness, anxiousness, maybe just all the different feelings across the board.
By the way, you saw Brendan Paul today, didn't you? He was in the courtroom at the beginning. Talk to us about what that was like. Mm-hmm. And also, for anybody who doesn't know, why is he an important witness? What do you expect him to testify to?
Yeah, well, I personally think he's a pretty important witness. He was Diddy's assistant, but also, and I'm sure maybe this will be something that is brought, and talked about either by the prosecution or the defense, or it might not be talked about altogether. But what we do know about Brendan Paul is he was named in one of the lawsuits against Sean Combs, kind of naming him as a drug mule. But then we learned during the course of this trial that he was actually one of Diddy's assistants. And so I think because he kind of had to invoke his Fifth Amendment right not to kind of, self-incriminate himself, I think it might possibly have to do with just drugs, and maybe drugs that were taken, and maybe large amounts of drugs that were given to Diddy, and maybe that were bought and paid for possibly by Brendan Paul. So I'm kind of curious of what he has to say. But I will say this, Jesse, when I saw him today in court, it was kind of weird seeing, we've seen his photo, right? But it was weird seeing like him in full person. He's very tall. He came in with a suit this morning before the jury was brought in to kind of get his immunity order, which was signed off by the judge. But he is very tall. He comes in with the suit. He seems kind of like, this is out of his element in terms of testifying. But what we do know is he was subpoenaed to testify. And so even in terms of just him like answering Mary Slavic or Christy Slavic's questions this morning about his immunity deal, he was looking kind of in the wrong direction. He wasn't looking at the person who was actually asking the questions. And so it'll be interesting to see what he's like when he does eventually go up to testify. It's unclear, though, given the amount or how long the cross-examination has taken, what time that'll be, if it'll trickle into tomorrow. So we'll kind of wait and see what he all has to say when he eventually testifies.
Fabiola Delgado LeBron is worried about you. Elizabeth, did you have breakfast with that Celsius? Because I don't want you crashing later. So everybody's worried if you're getting enough sleep, if you're eating the right things.
Yes. I know someone wrote in the comments yesterday that I looked exhausted, and I was just like, I texted my mom. I was like, do I look tired? Do I look exhausted? But I promise I'm getting at least 5 hours of sleep. I'm eating in the morning. I'm eating before I go back to court.
That's a backwards comment, right? You look tired. You look drained. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Okay. We got a question from Defying the Norm. Is Diddy's family still attending every day?
Yes. Diddy's family is still attending every day. It's kind of a different lineup in terms of who all is showing up. So, for example, today we saw Justin Combs inside the courtroom. Janice Combs has been coming to court pretty much every single day. I will say we haven't seen his daughter since probably the first week of trial. And so it's been a while since we've seen them. I'm sure they'll come back probably during the closing arguments or sometime possibly once the defense case starts. But we haven't seen his sister, Keisha, this week. We haven't seen Christian Combs. I don't think we've seen Christian Combs this week, and I don't think we've seen Quincy this week, but it's only Tuesday, so who knows? Maybe they'll show up tomorrow, maybe they'll show up Friday, because we are off on Thursday, so we can all celebrate the holiday too.
Let me ask you this. When you're listening to this testimony and you're seeing these summary witnesses, are you seeing new messages you haven't seen before? Are you seeing things that were already mentioned by Cassie or Jane or other witnesses, Mia? Or are there messages that are completely new? Are there travel records that are completely new? Are there receipts that are completely new?
I think for the most part, you know, in terms of just what we're seeing new, it's maybe possibly the American Express credit card statements, which we're seeing, you know, a lot of money that is spent either to book travel, to book these hotel rooms. And again, it's a lot of money. And of course, you know, Diddy's credit card bill is not just, you know, a $500, $1,000. It's like, you know, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So maybe that's probably the newest information we're seeing. But in terms of just these text messages that we're seeing, maybe possibly the ones that were around March of 2016 when Christina Coram and Eli Maroon, one of the assistants, were texting about how to get Eddie Garcia's phone number and just some of that. I feel like that was kind of the newer stuff that we were seeing. But in terms of even the messages between Cassie and Diddy, Diddy to Cassie, Diddy to Christina Coram and vice versa, I feel like, and they feel like that because, you know, we've seen so many messages, but it does feel like these are things we've seen before. And I think they're just kind of making it seem new because they're attaching it to a timeline, kind of putting, you know, a date with a corresponding exhibit number all attached to everything, that maybe it's supposed to feel new, but it does feel like the same messages that we've seen weeks before or even just recently that are just being shown to the jury over and over again.
Elizabeth, got a question from Naturally Now. Any difference between how the men and the women jurors react to these videos? And that, by the way, thanks for amazing reporting. So there you go, another fan from Naturally Now.
Well, thank you so much. But as far as just the difference between the male and the female jurors, I'm not seeing much. And here's the issue of that. Where I'm sitting inside the courtroom is kind of like a little of an obstructed view, mainly because of the giant exhibit screen. And I normally sit by the giant exhibit screen because I have bad eyesight. And so I really need to be able to see what we're seeing in terms of these exhibits. And so from what I've seen of just the female jurors, they kind of turn in an angle where I can't see their face. Really, I'm just kind of seeing their back. So unfortunately, I'm not able to get what their reaction is in terms of just seeing, especially these, you know, freak off tapes and those types of things. But for the most part, I think it's kind of across board in terms of just how professional they all have been. I don't think anybody's been giggling or kind of, you know, shielding their eyes or any of that sort, or taking off their headphones too early, but also taking off the headphones when I think they're kind of tired of hearing enough of what they're hearing and having to listen to.
All right, Elizabeth. Well, I'll tell you what, we're gonna send you back. I know that you have a lot more reporting to do for the day. By the way, Elizabeth's gonna be on with me later when we do a full daily recap on Sidebar, everything that happened during today's testimony, because this is just the middle of the day. I mean, Elizabeth, real quick, do you think they're gonna go to 5 today? I mean, yesterday they ended kind of early. Do you know if they're gonna go till 5? Because I think if they need a little bit more time with this summary witness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tinny Garrigo says she still has a little bit less than an hour left of her cross-examination. Then given that there might be some redirect, I don't even know if Brendan Paul will actually get on this stand today, but I might be kind of jumping the gun a little bit too early there. I don't want to make any type of promises, but the judge didn't give any type of signal as in terms of if we're going to end at 3 today or possibly at 5. Maybe there's like a little happy medium and we can at least end by like 4 o'clock today, but we'll see. We'll see.
All right.